John the Baptist was Jesus' cousin.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
All right. But anyway, would you mind getting the music, please?
Oh, yeah.
I'm already not very loud. But I'm not gonna go verse by verse. You guys already read it. I'm just gonna point out to you what God pointed out to me about John the Baptist and what we can learn from John the Baptist. That's kind of my main thing. What can we learn from how he lived his life, what he did? The first thing I want to point out is that John the Baptist, he chose calling over comfort. And when I say that, if you are familiar with John the Baptist's story, which you can see in Luke chapter 1, it gets it's a very long chapter. His father was a priest. His father's name was Zechariah. Now, Zechariah was a well-respected priest. He got to do one of the highest honors that you can do in Jerusalem. Only 14 pastors a year would be able to do that. So think about how many pastors there are in just St. Louis alone. There's a lot of them. So imagine now the whole nation. Only 14 would be able to do this, and then it was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Once you did it, you never got to do it again. So John the Baptist's father was very respected amongst the people of that time. And his mother was known for being very faithful as well. So he came from, like I said, a family of status. He left all of that behind to fulfill the call that God had for him. And that's something that we can all learn from. He chose the discomfort of the wilderness over the comfort of his inheritance. He left that behind. And every single person in this room, there is something that you have to die to in order to step into what God is calling you to. And that's the first thing that, I kind of got from John. Now, when John was in the wilderness, in the Greek, the wilderness means solitary or lonely, desolate. It's a dry place. I believe it's in Matthew chapter 4 or 5 is when Jesus was led into the wilderness after John the Baptist baptized him. Now, if we look through verse 19, 20, the Jewish leaders of the time, they were trying to figure out why John the Baptist was doing what he was doing. Because you have to realize, John the Baptist was in the wilderness. So when he was preaching to all these people, some people call him the first mega pastor. When he was in the wilderness, people were coming from all over to hear him preach. So it wasn't just he was in a town. No, he was out there. And they went to him. That's how powerful his word was. And so the Jewish leaders, they sent kind of spies to him. And they were okay, so who are you? Are you the Messiah? Are you the prophet Elijah? Are you just a prophet in general? They were trying to figure him out. But also, something I want you to get from that is that they tried to put John the Baptist in a box. They tried to tell him who they felt like he was, not who God called him to be. And when they asked him all those things, they were legitimate things to ask him about. But that brings me to my next thing, is that John was clear on the purpose that God had for him. He wasn't, trying to be anything but what God called him to be. In verse 23, he says, I am a voice shouting in the wilderness, clear the way, for the Lord is coming. See, another thing about John the Baptist, he was actually prophesied about in Isaiah chapter 40. I don't know if you guys know that, but John makes it clear that he was there to prepare the hearts of man for Christ. He wasn't there to bring glory to himself. John the Baptist was clear on what he was doing. See, he wasn't focused on the box that the Pharisees tried to put him in. And I want you guys to know, for all of you, that the Lord has authority over whatever box or whatever label that people try to put you in. It doesn't matter who they say you are, it's who God says you are. And this example that I thought about was when I was a kid, my sister would come into my room and she'd be like, clean up your room. I'd be like, no, I'm not. What do you mean? You're my sister. Why would I? You don't tell me what to do. I probably threw something at her, close the door, right? Just being honest. But then my dad would come in the room and he would be like, clean up this room. Be like, oh, get up, drop everything, start cleaning, right? Because there's authority in my dad's voice. That same authority that my dad has over my sister, God has over anyone and everyone. So whatever God calls you to be, that is what we hold on to, not what someone tells you it is. Hope that makes sense. Another thing, the next thing, is I already kind of said it. John the Baptist used his gift In this society, social media, Instagram, all things, it's really easy to allow that influence to gas up your head and be filled with pride. But John the Baptist decreased himself so that the Father will be exalted. In verse 30, he says, he is the one I was talking about. This is John the Baptist speaking. He said, he is the one I was talking about when I said, a man is coming after me who is far greater than I am. He existed long before me. See, John the Baptist realized that what he was doing was bigger than himself. It wasn't about him. It was about who he was preparing the hearts of man for. See, God blesses us with gifts. Every single person in this room has a gift. I don't care if you don't know what it is, you have one. That isn't a maybe, it's a promise. God has given all his children gifts. But God blesses us with gifts to give glory to his name, not our name. Galatians 1:10, it says, for am I seeking the approval of man or of God? Or am I trying to please man? If I were still trying to please man, I would not be a servant of Christ. How many of you guys have heard of Forrest Frank? Wow, you guys don't? Okay. Forrest Frank is like one of the biggest Christian artists. He's not like a gospel singer who just makes like music. You guys have probably heard his songs before. He has like 8 million monthly users or listeners just on Spotify alone. The only gospel group or whatever that has more than him is Elevation Worship. That's not even fair. It's only one of him. But I think it was late last year, Forrest Frank, he made a video and he was like, starting like now, I'm not going to any more award shows. These award shows, they don't bring glory to the name of Christ. They bring glory to me. And this is something that we can all take away from. This aspect of humility that Forrest Frank was exhibiting is essential. It is very hard to be a disciple of Christ and be full of pride. It doesn't work out well at all. It didn't work out well for him. It doesn't work out well at all. See, Luke 14:11, it says, for everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, and he who humbles himself will be exalted. Let me just rephrase that in like modern terms. If you think you're hot stuff and you're full of pride, the Lord will humble you. If you recognize that place of humility that the Lord tells us to stay in, he will exalt you. That's basically what that is. And I was kind of thinking about this for a while. And when I was just sitting at my house, God gave me some things to write down. I'm going to read it to you because I feel like it speaks to all of us. John was able to redirect the praise from man to Christ because him preaching in the wilderness was his worship. In other words, it was his surrender. How can you redirect the worship of man to God if you don't worship him yourself? This place of humility isn't something we only apply to whatever you feel called to do. It is a daily practice. It is a muscle that must be worked continuously. Like I said, humility is essential. It's not an option. Now, the last thing I want to say is that what John shows us, this is probably like the most important point. I probably said that about all of them. This is like actually the most important. John the Baptist, right? What he shows us is that God wasn't looking for a perfect vessel. He was looking for a submitted one. God isn't calling any of us to be perfect. In fact, John wasn't perfect. If you go later on in the book of John, you see that John actually doubts Jesus. So you guys just read about, right? John's like, prepare the way. This is the Messiah. I'm going to baptize him. I must decrease so he can increase, right? He's telling all these people this. And then literally later on, but I put Matthew in my notes, but John the Baptist says he sends his disciples to Jesus while he's in the middle of his ministry. And he's like, are you the one or should we look for another? Now that just contradicts everything that we just read. It's like, what do you mean? Now you don't know who he is? You just told him, we just read that he said he did. So he wasn't perfect, but God still used him. And actually later on, Jesus calls John the Baptist one of the greatest amongst the prophets. So why is it that John was able to doubt Jesus and Jesus still held him in high regard? Because we're not called to be perfect. We're called to be submitted. And no matter how John felt, he was still clear on who Jesus was in his life. I want to read you guys two verses. It's Romans 12:1 and 2. It says, I appeal to you, therefore, brothers and sisters, by the mercy of God, to present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God, which is your spiritual worship. Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind. By testing, you may discern what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect. I want everyone in this room to know, if you didn't hear half the things I just said, I want you to know that your past circumstances, or whatever you're going through right now, it does not disqualify you. In fact, God is able to use those things. I think it's in like Corinthians, 1 Corinthians or 2 Corinthians. It says that the Lord comforts us in our trials so that we can comfort others when they go through similar things. So the Lord can use whatever you got going on. And to close, I just want to point out a couple of people just to prove my point. Rahab, she was I'm going to mention like Old Testament and New Testament. So if you never heard these names, it's okay. It's fine. Rahab was a prostitute. Abraham, he lied. Also, quick point. Abraham lied, but he was considered the most faithful. God called him the most faithful, and he lied. Multiple times, might I add. He just kept lying. Jonah ran away from what God said. David was an adulterer, and he also ran away from a lot of things. He was running a lot. Paul used to kill Christians. He wrote 2/3 of the New Testament. Saul, he was full of pride, but God still used him in a way. Peter, he denied Jesus not one time, not 2 times. He denied him 3 times. It's like, that's kind of wild. Esther was an orphan, and she literally saved her people, right? So what I want you guys to know is that God wants to use you guys. You guys are going through things, I don't know what they are, but God can still use it. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to be submitted. Now, that's all I got. But I'm going to send the questions in the group chat, and you guys can just talk.
Yeah.